When Josh's wife, Claire, turned their marriage into a mind game, he thought he was the problem until he uncovered the truth. She wasn't just distant, she was emotionally controlling. And while she played her game of manipulation, Josh quietly prepared his final move. It wasn't revenge, it was checkmate. Josh had always believed that real love didn't fade, it just matured. He and Claire had been together for 12 years, married for 9. Their life was comfortable, familiar, even peaceful on the surface. They lived in a modest home in the suburbs outside Portland. No kids, not because they didn't want any, but because Claire kept saying the timing wasn't right. "Let me finish this project," she'd say. Or, "Maybe next year, when work calms down." Josh didn't press. He figured love meant patience. He didn't see the shift coming. It was subtle at first. A shorter goodnight kiss, less eye contact over dinner, a slight pause before answering his texts. Easy to miss if you weren't looking, but once he noticed, he couldn't unsee it. Claire wasn't angry or hostile, just absent. She floated through conversations like a guest waiting for her ride. When Josh asked if something was wrong, she'd wave it off with a half smile. "You overthink things too much," she'd say. At first, Josh blamed himself. That felt like the responsible thing to do. Maybe he was working too much. Maybe she needed more attention, more surprises, more spark. He made an effort. He started cooking dinner more often, planning spontaneous weekend getaways, even leaving handwritten notes on her bathroom mirror like they used to do in the early years. And for a while, it seemed to work. Claire would smile, kiss him on the cheek, compliment the dinner. But the warmth never lasted. By Monday morning, the coldness would return, sharper than before. Their intimacy became calculated. If he booked a nice trip, she'd be affectionate for a few days. If he said the wrong thing in front of her friends, she'd go silent for a week. There was no discussion, no argument, just a wall that appeared without warning. The rules kept changing, but Josh didn't even know what game he was playing. Once, in a quiet moment, he tried to talk about it. He was careful, not accusing, just curious. Claire was sitting on the edge of their bed, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. "You're keeping score," she said flatly. "No," Josh replied. "I'm just trying to understand what's happening between us." She pulled back the covers and said, "You're imagining problems again." That was the end of the conversation. Every time he tried to reach her, she slipped further away. But then, without warning, she'd reel him back in. A flirty text, a sudden burst of affection, a night where she acted like they were newlyweds again. And just as quickly, she'd go cold. Josh wasn't chasing sex. He was chasing something real, something honest. But everything with Claire began to feel staged, manipulative. She once curled up next to him on the couch after a long fight, whispering things she hadn't said in months. The next morning, she was back to being distant, criticizing the coffee he'd made. He felt like he was being tested, rewarded when he passed, ignored when he failed. He stopped initiating things. He didn't want to get hurt anymore. That only made things worse. Claire accused him of being emotionally distant, of not trying. One night, after a company party, she got drunk and threw it in his face. "You used to care more. You used to fight for me." Josh just stood there, watching her fall asleep in her dress, makeup smeared, words slurred. He wanted to scream, "I've been fighting this whole time. You just never noticed." But he didn't. He just stared at her, wondering when he'd become the villain in his own marriage. The worst part wasn't the distance. It was the confusion. Every time he tried to adapt, she shifted the goalposts. He tried being romantic. She said he was clingy. He gave her space. She accused him of pulling away. He couldn't win. And somewhere deep down, he started to wonder if that was the point. Then came the night that changed everything. Claire had invited friends over, people from her yoga class, book club, a couple of co-workers. Josh played host, poured drinks, kept the kitchen clean, and tried not to say anything embarrassing. He was used to walking on eggshells. Then during a round of party games, Claire laughed and said, "Josh used to be hot when we first met. Now I guess I got the security instead." Everyone laughed, everyone but Josh. For a moment, the room went quiet, and he felt every pair of eyes flick toward him. He smiled politely, but something inside him shifted. He realized then, Claire didn't just feel distant. She didn't respect him, not in private, not in public. not at all. That night, he watched her brush her teeth, eyes fixed on her reflection, completely unaware of the man standing behind her. And for the first time in years, Josh didn't feel confused. He felt clarity. Claire hadn't changed suddenly. She'd been changing all along. And he'd been too in love or too afraid to see it. But that was about to change. After that dinner party, Josh couldn't look at Claire the same way. Something had broken. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Her joke wasn't the problem. It was the ease with which she said it, the casual cruelty wrapped in a smirk, and the silence that followed. That night, he didn't try to talk. He didn't ask her why she'd embarrassed him in front of their guests. He already knew the answer. It wasn't about humor. It was about control. In the days that followed, Josh began to observe instead of react. Every small interaction took on new meaning. The way she'd give him affection after getting her way. The sudden cold shoulder when he pushed back or said no. It was all part of a system, a loop she controlled. The pattern became undeniable. If Josh did something Claire liked, she'd reward him. Physical touch, kind words, interest. If he disappointed her in any way, she'd withdraw. No confrontation, no discussion, just absence. One weekend, he surprised her with a trip. They laughed, held hands, even made love like they used to. By Tuesday, she was criticizing the hotel choice and ignoring his texts. Another time, she picked a fight over nothing, vanished into silence for 3 days, and then showed up in lingerie asking if he wanted to start over. He wanted to believe it was love, but it was performance, temporary charm to keep him uncertain. He started noticing how every decision he made was filtered through her mood. Would she approve? Would this upset her? Would there be consequences? That realization hit hardest when he ran into Brandon, a mutual friend he hadn't seen in a year. They met by chance at a cafe. After the usual small talk, Brandon grinned and said, "Claire's still running the show, huh?" It was meant as a joke, but Josh couldn't laugh. Not anymore. That night, he started journaling. Not as therapy, but as a record. Every time Claire flipped the switch, warmth to cold, affection to silence, he wrote it down. And soon he saw the rhythm, the same dance again and again. Claire once claimed to hate clingy men. She'd say Josh was too emotional when he asked why she hadn't spoken to him in days. When he expressed concern, she'd call him insecure. She dismissed every plea for connection as weakness. But she cataloged his flaws like evidence. Every late reply, every missed cue, every attempt to stand up for himself. He remembered a night they'd watched a documentary about cult dynamics, how leaders use intimacy and reward to control followers. Claire laughed and said, "People are easy to manipulate when they're in love." Josh had laughed too, back then. Now he wasn't so sure she was joking. The journal became his compass. He stopped trying to fix things. Instead, he began understanding them. This wasn't a marriage. It was conditioning. Then came the shift. Josh stopped texting her during the day. No more updates. No more "just thinking of you" messages. He stopped planning surprises. If Claire asked him to do something, he'd nod and reply, "I'll get to it when I can." No more urgency. No more proving himself. At first, Claire didn't notice. But soon her tone changed. She started asking instead of ordering. She brought him dinner one night. She hadn't done that in years. But Josh didn't respond with gratitude. He was polite, calm, detached. One evening, she walked into their bedroom in a silk robe he hadn't seen in years. She stood in the doorway, waiting for a reaction. Josh looked up from his book and said, "You cold?" Her smile faltered. "No, just felt like dressing up for you." "Looks expensive," he said, turning back to the page. She lingered a moment, then disappeared into the bathroom. Josh didn't follow. He didn't need to. Claire tried harder after that, briefly. She texted him sweet things, asked about his day, tried to revive the version of herself he once adored. But Josh didn't bite. He knew now. This wasn't affection. It was bait. He redirected his energy, quietly, reviewed their finances, noticed how much of their shared money was going into her personal indulgences, spa treatments, boutique shopping, luxury skincare, all labeled self-care. He opened a separate bank account. Not out of spite, for preparation. Josh stopped fixing her car, stopped making her appointments, stopped performing tasks she used to assign like a manager overseeing an employee. She noticed. The tension grew. One day her best friend Elise called him. They hadn't spoken directly since a brunch where Claire mocked him in front of their friends, while Elise just sipped her drink and said nothing. "Can I ask you something?" Elise said. "And I mean this with love." "Okay. Are you okay? With Claire, I mean." Josh hesitated. "Why?" "Because she's been different lately. Like she's worried. She keeps saying you've changed." Josh smiled. "She's not wrong." Elise went quiet. Then she said, "I've never said this out loud, but she kind of does this. Builds walls, pushes people away, then plays the victim when they stop trying." Josh didn't reply. He didn't need to. That conversation stayed with him because it confirmed what he already suspected. Claire wasn't confused. She was losing control. She felt the shift and didn't know how to fix it because she only knew how to control, not connect. And Josh was done being controlled. Claire didn't panic right away. At first, she tried charm. Her compliments returned. So did the surprise texts, the occasional flirtation, the soft-spoken apologies for small things that hadn't bothered her in years. She asked if Josh wanted to go away for a weekend, suggested they start therapy. But Josh didn't flinch. He nodded, smiled, agreed vaguely, and then did nothing. It wasn't defiance. It was detachment. And that, more than anything, unsettled her. Josh had changed. Not dramatically, not in any way she could call out as cruel or wrong. He was just unavailable, emotionally unplugged, still polite, still present, but no longer responsive to her tactics. When she gave affection, he didn't reach for more. When she pulled away, he didn't chase. Claire noticed. And the tension that followed wasn't explosive. It was quiet, calculated. One night she came home late, clearly tipsy, heels in her hand. Josh was on the couch watching an old movie. She smiled at him the way she used to when they were dating. "You don't wait up for me anymore," she said, dropping her shoes by the door. "No," Josh replied, eyes on the screen. "I wait for people who are coming home to me, not through me." She stood frozen, caught between playing coy and starting a fight. But Josh didn't give her the space to do either. He turned up the volume slightly. She walked past him without another word. The next morning she was distant again, cold, back in control, at least in her mind. But Josh didn't care anymore, because while she played her old roles, he had already moved on emotionally. The game was over. Now it was about logistics. Josh had spent weeks preparing, quietly. No confrontations, no drama. He reviewed bank statements, closed joint accounts, created backups of important documents. He moved money into a private account, canceled her access to certain services they'd shared, and restructured his schedule. All while Claire planned her birthday. She'd been hinting about it for months. A rooftop spa weekend, a hotel she found on Instagram, a brunch place that served champagne cocktails. Josh pretended not to hear any of it. He nodded, changed the subject, acted distracted. The week before her birthday, he left an envelope on the kitchen counter. Claire noticed it the moment she walked in. Inside, a printed itinerary. 3 nights at the exact hotel she'd wanted. First-class airfare, spa reservations, room service. Everything she dreamed of. But for one. "Who's going with me?" she asked, holding the papers like they might burn her fingers. "No one," Josh replied calmly. "It's for you." She blinked. "A solo trip." "You've always said you need space. I gave it to you." Claire didn't know how to respond, because it wasn't punishment, and it wasn't a reward. It was something unfamiliar, indifference. She left the next day. While she posed for photos and posted about recharging, Josh packed. He didn't rush. He wasn't angry. He was methodical. He left behind the wedding photo, the journal he'd kept for over a year, filled with every manipulation, every cycle, every time she twisted love into leverage. He left a note. Not long, not emotional, just final. "Claire, you were right about one thing. Love is power, but it only works when both people care enough to keep playing. I don't. You used affection like a prize, silence like punishment. And I let you, but not anymore. There's no forwarding address, no hidden affair, no last-minute plea. You wanted control, now you have it. But the board's empty. The game is over. Josh turned off his phone, closed out of shared accounts, took only what belonged to him, and then he walked out, not because he was bitter, but because he'd finally accepted the truth. Staying was a slow death. Leaving was freedom. When Claire returned, the house was quiet. The bed was made. The wedding photo still sat on the dresser, untouched. Her name was on the hotel reservation, but Josh was gone. It wasn't abandonment. It was escape, and Claire knew it. Claire returned from her solo birthday trip expecting a celebration. She had taken selfies in the spa robe, posted filtered shots of her brunch, and tagged the hotel with captions like, "Self-care weekend" and "blessed." But when she walked into the house, it felt hollow. Josh was gone. At first, she assumed it was temporary. Maybe he had gone to stay with a friend. Maybe this was some kind of stunt. But the more she looked around, the more obvious it became. He hadn't just stepped out. He had moved on. No keys, no clothes, no laptop. The joint credit cards didn't work. The accounts were locked. The backup drive where Josh kept all their financial records? Gone. But the letter, that was still there, tucked neatly under the journal he'd left behind. Claire read it once, then again, then a third time. She didn't cry, not at first, because Claire didn't understand what had happened. Not fully. She had always believed she held the upper hand, that Josh would come back no matter how far she pushed him. He always had before. This time he hadn't even said goodbye. That's when she called Elise. Elise answered with hesitation. Claire's voice cracked on the line. He left, just like that. Elise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You knew he was unhappy." Claire's voice rose. "But people don't just leave without trying to fix it." "Maybe he did," Elise said. "Maybe you just didn't notice." Claire hung up without replying. Over the next few days, she called Josh's phone, straight to voicemail. She sent emails. No reply. Her last message was a simple subject line. "Can we talk?" Josh opened it 3 days later. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. Josh had moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. There was no one demanding attention, no one turning silence into a weapon. The space was quiet in the best way possible. He started running again, attended meetups for design professionals, reconnected with old friends. People who hadn't heard from him in years began reaching out. At a tech conference, a colleague pulled him aside and said, "You look lighter." That word stuck with him. Not better, not happier. Lighter, as if he'd been carrying someone else's weight and finally set it down. Meanwhile, Claire's world became unfamiliar. Her friends were polite but distant. Elise stopped returning her texts. Co-workers seemed hesitant around her, unsure of how to navigate the shift in her life. The version of herself she had curated for so long, the polished, confident, admired Claire, no longer worked when the man she'd spent years shaping disappeared without conflict. Weeks passed, then months. One afternoon in a grocery store, Josh turned a corner and found her standing by the produce section. She looked startled. He simply nodded and kept walking. She didn't follow. That was the moment Claire finally understood. She didn't know this version of Josh, the one who no longer needed her validation, the one who didn't wait for her moods to shift, the one who wasn't afraid to leave without slamming the door. For the first time in years, Claire felt something she couldn't control. Loss. And Josh? He didn't feel triumph. He felt clarity. Not everything needed closure. Some stories end with the absence of pain, and that was enough. Josh didn't look back. Not because he was trying to prove something, but because there was nothing left behind worth reclaiming. For years, he had shaped his life around Claire. Her moods, her silence, her approval. Now his days belonged to him. He settled into a new rhythm. The apartment was small but peaceful. No passive-aggressive remarks, no last-minute guilt trips, no confusion about where he stood or what invisible rule he might have broken that day. The quiet wasn't empty. It was clean. At work, his colleagues noticed. He spoke more in meetings, took leadership on a new design project. One of them said he seemed more focused. He hadn't realized how much energy he used to spend managing emotional landmines at home until he didn't have to anymore. He ran into Brandon again, the friend from the cafe, who raised a brow when Josh mentioned he was living alone. "So, it's done?" Brandon asked. "Yeah," Josh said simply. "For good." Brandon nodded, then said something Josh didn't expect. "Took guts, man. Most people stay stuck forever." Josh didn't feel brave. He felt sane. He'd spent years trapped in a relationship that punished honesty and rewarded compliance. He hadn't just left a marriage, he'd escaped a system. Claire reached out one more time. This time, it was a longer email. Polite, measured. She wrote that she missed him, that she didn't understand how it all spiraled, that she just wanted to meet for coffee. No pressure, just a conversation. Josh didn't reply. He read it, sat with it, and deleted it. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing to say. The person Claire wanted to meet no longer existed. He had grown out of the role she had written for him. His healing wasn't about dating someone new or declaring himself free. It was about rediscovering his own thoughts, learning to trust them again. For too long, he had second-guessed every feeling, wondering if he was too sensitive or too demanding. Now he understood the truth. He wasn't either. He had just been in the wrong relationship. It's easy to forget who you are when someone else defines your value through control. But once you start reclaiming that space, slowly, consistently, something clicks. Josh didn't need Claire's validation. He didn't crave an apology. What he wanted, he already had. Peace, autonomy, and clarity. Closure didn't come through confrontation. It came the day he woke up and realized he hadn't thought about Claire in days. It came when he no longer flinched at unexpected messages, when he stopped imagining what he'd say if she called again. He didn't hate her. He didn't love her. He simply didn't carry her anymore. Months later, he sat at a coffee shop with a friend from college. She asked how things had ended with Claire. He told her the truth. Not the dramatic version, not the headline. Just the real story. She wanted control, he said, and I gave it to her, but I left the game. His friend nodded. You don't seem angry. I'm not, Josh said. That's the point. He paid for his coffee, stepped outside, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, there was no weight on his shoulders, no fear of walking into the wrong conversation, no need to decode someone else's silence. This was closure, not a moment, but a series of choices, small, steady steps away from something that had stopped feeling like love a long time ago. And in its place, a life that finally felt like his own.